Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week as always, well, ideally as always. And as always, I'd like to thank the following people that basically sent me a lot of these tips. That would be Jason Dance, Barrett Peterson, Chris Fallon, and Jacqueline Wolf. Guys, thank you so much. And if you have a tip for me, please send it my way, and I'll give you a shout out here and also on my nationally syndicated radio show. And with that, let's start with the TOR Network. This is one of the basic ways that a lot of people get to dark web sites. Since at least 2017, a mysterious threat actor has run thousands of malicious servers in entry, middle, and exit positions in the TOR network, basically in what a security researcher has described as an attempt to de-anonymize users. Now, this is being tracked as KAX-17. The threat actor ran at its peak more than 900 malicious servers as part of the TOR network, which typically tends to have around 9 to 10,000 servers daily. So obviously, that's about 10% of the entire network. That's a huge number. A lot of people use TOR. Now, some of these servers work as entry points or guards, others are middle relays, and some are the exit points for the TOR network, so that's a huge problem. And when I'm talking to people that say, hey, I'm interested in looking into the dark web, I want to dabble, all those kinds of things, I warn them, you never know necessarily who you're connecting to or if the sites are infected, and there you go. Best of luck. If you are in the TOR network, you may have been de-anonymized against your wishes. Moving on, let's talk about Ubiquiti Networks. They're basically the makers of wireless access points, routers, more, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you recall, and I did talk about it here and on my radio show, they recently had a massive data breach that I reported on, and now we've got a big update because an Oregon man and former employee of Ubiquiti was arrested and charged today, or I should say a couple of days ago, with hacking the company's servers, stealing gigabytes of information, and then attempting to extort Ubiquiti for $2 million when Ubiquiti began investigating this data breach. Now, this suspect was arraigned in court earlier in the week, was identified as Nicholas Sharp, age 36, from Portland, where he previously worked as a software engineer in Ubiquiti's cloud division from August of 2018 to March of 2021. According to the indictment unsealed by the U.S. Department of Justice, Sharp hacked his employer in December of 2020 for reasons that are not yet clear, above and beyond, let's say, disgruntlement and wanting cash from his employers. I'm guessing he thought he was screwed. There you go. You can't trust every Nick. Please trust me. Moving on. Let's talk about the website of the Principality of Sealand. If you don't know who they are a micronation in the North Sea. It was interesting because they were offering a whole bunch of different stuff to basically anybody with money to basically raise money for their micronation, including passports. You could buy a passport to Sealand, or the Principality of Sealand. It's an interesting little thing. I recommend everybody Google it if you want to smirk. Now, a threat actor basically hit their website and planted malicious code in their web store, which basically the government of the Principality of Sealand was using to sell things like Baron, Count, Duke, and other nobility titles. So if you want to be like the Duke of Sealand, there you go. Now, this was a web skimmer hit, meaning they were skimming all of your credit card information plus your other information as you were buying these prestigious titles for Sealand. Now, all transactions made from the site since October 12th basically were intercepted by these attackers. So, if you're turning a loved one into a Duke or Duchess of Sealand for Christmas, or Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or Voodoo Day, whatever you believe, heads up to you. Moving on, let's talk about the Google Play Store, specifically the users. If you're an Android user, heads up, because more than 300,000 Android users were infected with banking Trojans after installing apps from official Google Play Store apps over the last few months. Now, this malicious code was hidden inside fully functional apps that did things like create QR codes or did QR code scanning, PDF scanners, security tools, fitness apps, two-factor authenticators, all that kind of stuff. But beside the actual legitimate functionality they offered, and they did work in what you thought you were getting, these apps also included a special module called a loader. Now, some of these infected apps are, and these are the exact names of them, pretty generic if you ask me: Two-Factor Authenticator, Protection Guard, QR Creator Scanner, Master Scanner Live, QR Scanner 2021, QR Scanner, PDF Document Scanner, Scan to PDF, PDF Document Scanner, PDF Document, Crypto Tracker, Gym and Fitness Trainer. So if you've downloaded any one of those on your Android, you got to wipe it, run a virus scan. Hopefully it'll leave it at that. But there you go. Heads up, 300,000 Android users. Moving on, let's talk about Colorado's Delta Montrose Electric Association, or DMEA. They are still struggling to recover from a devastating cyber attack last month that took down 90% of their internal systems and caused 25 years of historical data to be lost. Now, the company said it began noticing these issues on November 7th, and the cyber attack eventually brought down most of its internal network services. The attack affected all of the company's support systems, payment processing tools, billing platforms, and other tools provided to its customers. DME said basically that the attackers were targeting specific parts of the company's internal network and corrupted saved documents, spreadsheets, forms, indicating that it looks like it was a ransomware incident. Now, the attack basically affected their phone and email systems as well, but DMEA said the power grid and fiber network were not touched during this attack, probably industrial control systems. So there you go. If you're in Colorado and you use a Delta Montrose Electric Association for all your electricity needs, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about massive electronics manufacturer Panasonic out of Japan. The company said they began noticing issues on November 7th, and the cyber attack that they got eventually brought down most of its internal network services. The attack affected all of the company's support systems, payment processing tools, billing platforms, and other tools provided basically for its customers. That's what we know so far. Panasonic hasn't said anything else regarding that attack, so we're going to see what happens there, and there you go. Moving on, let's talk about Planned Parenthood. They've been in the news recently, basically because of the entire Supreme Court arguments over the state of abortion, Roe v. Wade, and all of that. Planned Parenthood obviously has a big vested interest in those kinds of things. And here's what's going on. Not good for Planned Parenthood. The data of Planned Parenthood, a nonprofit organization based in LA, essentially was allegedly breached, and this involved information on 400,000 of their patients. However, according to the organization, there's no evidence that that information was utilized for fraudulent reasons. That's always what they say during data breaches. Now, it further stated that basically the attacker implanted a computer virus and exfiltrated files, compromising patients' names, addresses, insurance, and medical information, including therapies they may have undergone. Now, the data breach was basically between October 9th and 17th, and quote, patients are encouraged to review statements from their healthcare providers or healthcare insurers and contact them immediately if they see changes for services they did not receive. That is according to the LA branch, and there you go. So this obviously is a huge thing, a lot of sensitive data, especially given what Planned Parenthood does, and if that gets out there, that may be not just damaging, but politically damaging to 400,000 women or so within the LA area. Heads up to you, Planned Parenthood patients. Moving on, let's talk about Israel's Machon Mor. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize, my Israeli viewers. Basically, the Machon Mor Medical Institute basically was hit by an Iran-based hacking group known as Black Shadow, and they leaked the whole database of personal information from that medical institute, including medical records of around 290,000 patients. The information was made public when a ransom demand of $1 million in cryptocurrency was not met, according to the Times of Israel. Now, the report stated that the Machon Mor Medical Institute database, which contained information on treatments, appointments, test results, immunizations for about these 290,000 people, was published on November 2nd. In addition, an Israeli internet hosting company was hit by Black Shadow last month as well, causing their servers and number of websites to go down. Obviously a huge problem, so hopefully the Machon Mor Medical Institute in Israel will get back on their feet. Moving on. Let's talk about the DNA Diagnostics Center, or DDC, in Ohio. They disclosed a hacking incident that affects 2.1 million patients. Now, the incident resulted in a confirmed data breach that occurred between May 24th of this year and July 28th as well, through July 28th. And the firm concluded that its internal investigation on October 29 of 2021, I cannot speak today. The information that the attackers accessed included full names, credit card numbers with the 3-digit code, the CVV, debit card with the 3-digit number as well, financial account numbers, platform account passwords, and all of that. The compromised database contained older backups dating between 2004 and 2012, and it's not linked to the active systems and databases used to DDC today. So hopefully it's just older information, but heads up if you use the DNA Diagnostics Center based out of Ohio. Moving on, let's talk about thousands of AT&T subscribers because unpatched, years-old vulnerabilities in networking devices have allowed malware to infect thousands of AT&T customers in the United States, according to a new report from a Chinese cybersecurity firm. Now, the malware basically functions like a backdoor, one that would allow an attacker to basically penetrate networks, steal data, and do other rather unsavory things. Now, the unfortunate infections were recently uncovered by researchers with Keyhole 360 after they infiltrated a previously unknown botnet and discovered that it had targeted at least 5,700 US-based AT&T subscribers. In this particular case, the malware in question appears to basically have seeped into users' enterprise network edge devices via a vulnerability that was originally discovered in 2017 and was left unpatched. So if you're using AT&T and you're an enterprise customer, you definitely want to check in, especially if you've been an enterprise customer since 2017. Make sure that AT&T is updating their infrastructure equipment they are supplying you. Moving on. Speaking of infrastructure equipment, let's talk about 9 popular Wi-Fi routers. Most of the stuff we are going to find in homes, given the brands. Security researchers analyzed 9 popular Wi-Fi routers and found a total of 226 potential vulnerabilities in them, even when they were running the latest firmware. And you can guess some of the violators companies that I'm going to mention here, especially on the home side. We are talking about Asus, AVM, D-Link, Netgear, Edimax, TP-Link, Synology, and Linksys. And obviously these are used by tens of millions of people worldwide to essentially get themselves onto the internet, usually home, sometimes small business. Now, the frontrunner in terms of the number of vulnerabilities are the TP-Link Archer AX6000, having 32 flaws, and the Synology RT2600AC, obviously a wireless access point, which had 30 security bugs. So if you are running Asus, AVM, D-Link, Netgear, Edimax, TP-Link, Synology, or Linksys, you definitely want to check in, and hopefully they'll get those updated soon. Moving on, let's talk about Gale Healthcare Solutions in the state of Florida. A database run by them has 170,239 exposed records that include names, emails, home addresses, photos of people, and in some cases, social security numbers, as well as tax documents. That's all I have so far. Maybe just a leaky database. Maybe it's ransomed. I couldn't get a straight answer. But if you use Gale Healthcare Solutions in the state of Florida, definitely check in. Moving on, let's head on over to Tulane University because health records and names of people who visited Tulane University Medical Center's emergency department, including for things like attempted suicide and assaults, not to mention graphic information about sexual assaults and the identities of victims, witnesses, and suspects, have all been exposed. All of this was basically obviously protected under federal privacy laws like HIPAA, but it was visible to anybody with a Tulane email address until this past Friday morning due to a Tulane University Police Department security breach essentially reported by local news. In other words, if you went to Tulane, like tulane.edu, you could have seen all of this information, including assault victims. Now, the unredacted police reports dated back to October 5 of 2020, so just over a year, and they were intended to be circulated internally to a list of 48 Tulane University administrators, but the breach meant that anybody with a Tulane email address had access to more than 60 of these unredacted daily activity reports for 2 years. Obviously a huge problem. Tulane has since locked that down. Hopefully, if you were a victim, and I hope none of you were that are watching this, and you reported to Tulane University Medical Center, your information was secure, but you definitely want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about the San Juan Regional Medical Center. They were hit with a class action lawsuit over their 2020 data breach. Now, the suit claims the hospital was negligent in handling patients' information, resulting in the exposure of health information and other sensitive private data. The new figure of 68,792 individuals affected by the data breach that was included in the class action complaint is an exponentially larger number than the hospital had actually disclosed earlier this year, and I went back and I did look. That was vastly numbered. This is actually more than double what they were claiming. Obviously, a huge problem. So, if you are a San Juan Regional Medical Center patient, you may be entitled soon to compensation. And finally, we need to talk about the U.S. State Department. This was actually a little bit of a slower week, but this is an interesting way to end it. Apple has alerted 11 U.S. Embassy employees that their iPhones have been hacked in recent months with the Pegasus spyware from the NSO group. If you recall, this is an Israeli group that essentially was licensing software to government clients in dozens of countries that allow them to essentially secretly steal files, eavesdrops on conversations, track movements of their targets, all this kind of stuff. Basically, if this was in your phone, they knew everything that was going on, where you were going, what you were saying. They could turn on cameras, mics, you name it. It was absolutely nuts. I've talked about this extensively on my radio program and my daily videos and podcasts as well, and also here on Breaches of the Week. Now, this revelation, the first confirmed cases of Pegasus being used to target American officials, comes months after U.S. officials blacklisted the NSO group amid allegations that its foreign government clients had enabled hacking against unspecified embassy employees, political activists, human rights workers, and more. Not to mention a few Nobel Prize laureates that were basically caught up in that as well. So that is absolutely nuts. Now, these and other actions basically come after the July publication of the Pegasus Project, an investigation by the Washington Post and 16 other news organizations into the activities of the NSO group. One of these investigations findings was that U.S. diplomats and other embassy employees were at risk from Pegasus, especially when they used phone numbers based overseas. Now, these attacks were concentrated at the U.S. Embassy in Uganda's capital, Kampala, according to people familiar with the Apple notifications. At least some of those targeted were U.S. citizens working as foreign service officers. Last month, Apple began alerting people who had been potentially compromised by the Pegasus exploit known as forced entry, and sued the company, seeking to prevent it from using Apple products in the future. Last I heard that I reported on, because of this, the government of Israel, where NSO is, actually reduced their export for cyber offensive tools down to about 25 to 35 countries. I can't remember. I listed them all out the other day in video, and essentially these are countries that Israel has an excellent relationship with, or they're established democracies. Pegasus was basically selling to anybody, including monarchs, dictators, all that kind of stuff, because I guess money was money to them. The last I also heard is that NSO Group is essentially out of business by virtue of this. The world basically turned a blind eye. But this was a huge problem, and now we're seeing this is hitting American officials. They may not be the last ones here, as Apple continues to ferret out all of those that were infected by Pegasus, and which foreign governments are actually running these spying campaigns on Americans, Nobel Prize laureates, Germans. The Germans were caught up in this, and a whole bunch of others. So there you go. It was kind of a crazy week, but a shorter week for Breaches of the Week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please stay private. Thanks, everyone.